All right. Hello. Hello. Good morning. It is such a treat to see all of you here in this room. You know, several months ago, a letter fell through the door. You're like, more junk mail. You opened it. You read it. You thought, hey, I could do that. And you took a flyer on this. You sent it back in, and then lo and behold, you get a phone call. And we say, so how about it? 8 of your Saturdays, a handful of nights, would you do it with us? And you said yes. And so here we are, and I am so delighted to be able to welcome you to the Victoria Saanich Citizens Assembly on municipal amalgamation. That is a mouthful, huh? We're going to need an acronym of some kind. Victoria Saanich Citizens Municipal Amalgamation. You are sitting there right now, probably with a whole ton of questions about how it is we're going to understand everything we need to know about these communities, work our way through coming from different perspectives, and do some good work for these two communities. And ultimately in the spring, put out a recommendation that I assure you is going to have the interest and attention of just about everybody living in these two communities. My job as the host, the chair, your kind of fellow traveler in this entire assembly is to help us get from A to Z and to do it without losing anybody along the way. Right? So I'm going to take a fair bit of time this morning to answer some of your questions, to try and spell out how this process is going to work. We have a really terrific agenda. We're going to be able to hear from 3 super speakers today. We're going to be able to get into some conversations ourselves. And that's going to launch us, I think, in a very good way for all of the sessions that are to follow. Very importantly, especially beginning a process that is fundamentally about the governance of community and the governance of the land, I, of course, have to take a moment to properly acknowledge that these lands are, of course, the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, represented by the Songhees and the JOZHEETP nations and the Saanich peoples, represented by the Tsartlip and the Pequotchin, and the Seward, and the Secum, and the Malahat nations. And these, of course, are the peoples who have been the traditional stewards of these lands, who for more than 4,000 years in time immemorial have preserved a deep connection to the land and the waters in what is known today as Victoria and Saanich, British Columbia. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge a kind of interesting phenomenon, right? Because citizens' assemblies, a better, more inclusive way of doing democracy, right? Are nevertheless part of a way of governing ourselves, no matter how innovative, that is connected to a framework of governance that itself is a sort of byproduct of a colonial system, right? And these are systems. Even our efforts to be inclusive and welcoming that have pushed away and marginalized the traditional peoples of these lands. But we, as an assembly, are going to try and do better. And we're going to work, I think, really hard in our conversations together and in the learning that we do and the openness that we share to really try and respect all of the peoples and the land and the waters and the animals, and try through this work, through our dialogue, which is fundamentally about the future, to really connect to healing and to strengthening our community. That's the best result of this exercise, a strengthening of community. Now, some of you might know the Councillor Joe Seward from the Tsartlip First Nation. And he was going to come and he was going to welcome us and get us started in a good way this morning. And then he called us yesterday and said, Pete, I'm really sorry. I got COVID. It's not too bad, I understand, but he needs some rest. And the sweetest thing happened. He called up and texted this morning and said, do you mind if I send my mom? So I'm really delighted to be able to introduce to you Joe's mom, Ivy Seward. Please join us up here. And I had a chance to sit and reflect a little bit about this process this morning with medicine and think about all of the work we're going to do. And I really want to thank Joe and now thank you for being a part of this process.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Oh, that was such a beautiful opening. I really appreciate that. Sitting there with tears in my eyes, listening to what you have to share. Siamna Strelacha, Heiska Kunzneashla at the Ice Epishtia. Ihungi Quamcom to Squela Kunz at the Schwakashton Squela Kun at the Scapishtia. Nishna main Ivan Morris, the main lot, Saanich, Saanich. Nishna Joe Seward, Nishta Shkukwels at the Saanich Pelmo, with the Kosalish Pelmo. Jensen Hilak Nishquelaquins, Kunase Ane Eshla. At the Scapishtia, Asa, Sanjathan, Lakungitnam, Cowits and Squales. I really appreciate being here. My name is Ivy Seward. My ancestral name is JOZHEETH. Our names connect to the land, the waters, our traditional names as such. My son that has been mentioned here, the councilman of the JOZHEETH Nation, carries the same name as my late father, his grandfather, and then my father's late grandfather. So these names go back generations. They're very old names that get handed down to us. Sorry, I'm a little shooken from that opening. I really, really appreciate every word that was shared for the opening part. My late father spoke to me about how our traditional lands of how they lived on the lands, hunting and fishing. And my late father was one of the last ones of our people, Saanich people, Salish people that grew up being raised in our traditional longhouses. So that's where the whole extended family lived together and helped raise each other's children in all the traditional ways, the traditional teachings. And I really appreciate being invited here, well, to take my son's place this morning as he's not feeling well. So that I say, I constachel at the eight langanok at Saanich, Lukongan, Chacha eight langanoks. I welcome you all to the sacred homelands of the Saanich people, the Lukongan people. You know, we consider ourselves relatives. We're not neighbors to each other. And I appreciate you coming together to come in, have your meeting and discuss your Natsamat. Natsamat means coming together and working as one to help one another regarding our communities here on the South Island. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Again, I have to say, Heiska, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful words. I really do appreciate you coming together and doing what you're doing today. So I actually gave a little bit of giving thanks to JOZHEETH to strengthen your mind and have an open mind and coming together as one, Natsamat. That's a big, powerful word in the Sanchatan Lukongan language, and Cowichan, because those languages are all sister languages. And before I depart today, I want to share a song. It's a paddle song that belongs to my husband, him and his family. He's from the Saanich nation. And these paddle songs are very powerful. And you think of being in a canoe. Our traditional canoes are made of cedar. And those cedar, the Tsartlip name translates to the life giver. And when we walked in, I don't know if that's cedar, but I love the building. I just totally love it. It a little bit resembles our longhouses, and it looks beautiful, and it means a lot to me because, cedar is life to us. This is a strength giver for me when I wear this, so I'm really grateful. So I'm going to share a song. I have my late mom's drum. This is probably 70 years old. It was handed down to my daughter. My daughter's 19. So I'm borrowing my daughter's drum because I just feel so close to my mom just to hold her drum. This drum is older than me. So paddle songs are about when you're all in a large canoe. And I love that. The cedar is the tree of life. You picture yourself on a canoe, and if someone is out of stroke, then your canoe is going to become tippy. And you don't know if you're going to go over or almost go over. You don't want to go over. You're going to be in sync with each other and move forward. So that I leave with you. I'll share the song. Oh, oh, hey. Oh, oh, hey. Oh, 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 hey. Oh, oh, hey. Oh, and I'll leave that with you. I just totally love that song. It sounds like a love song. I just totally love that song. It belongs to my husband, his family, and my children. I'm just grateful to be here, and I just leave that with you. JOZHEEZHP. Thank you all.
Ivy, what a beautiful, beautiful way to begin. And please convey our thanks to Joe and hope that he's in good health soon. And Joe Sr., thank you for coming this morning as well. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you. There are many people to introduce, and we will all have a chance to introduce ourselves to each other in a moment. But two people who don't need much of an introduction are, of course, the good mayor of Victoria and the good mayor of Saanich. So let me just bring up right now Marianne Alto and Dean Murdock. Dean was first elected 2008 and became mayor in 2022, as did Marianne, and she was first elected in 2010 and has been mayor since 22. So welcome to you both. We're keen to hear your thoughts on this process and what you'd like to achieve through this when we send both of you a report in the spring.
Thank you. Come, Dean. Dean and I were actually going to wear the same jacket, but we thought that might be a bit of overkill.
You should have seen the dance number.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been
spectacular. Just to start with, thank you, Peter, for those wonderful words, and thank you, Ivy, of course. The grounding that you and your people bring to these events is just so treasured and just puts us in such a good place. For me, I won't say too much. As you can tell, I have quite a bad cold, thanks to UBCM and the thousands of people in a room. But I just wanted to be here for a moment and to say that all of you have one of the most remarkable opportunities that I think you'll ever be presented with in your commitments to local communities. And that is that you get to plan the future of two communities, and whether they are together or apart, or they share different things, or you look at those things that can be in between the yes or no, which I fervently hope you do. This is a chance for you to really be instrumental in designing communities for the next decades, perhaps even longer. And if you're grounded in the way that we were this morning, understanding what the utility is of this around the land and the waters that surround us, and you bring to that then your consideration of how you imagine the people can live together, you will truly bring something extraordinary to the councils when you're done next spring. And I know for me, our council has been very keen on waiting to see what you will do. This started for us in Victoria back in 2014 through a couple of different questions on the ballot at 14 and 18. And so we're kind of anxious to get going. So I just want to leave you with that sense of enormous responsibility, no pressure, but also the sense of incredible opportunity, because this is something that very few people get a chance to do. Very few people get a chance to actually design something for the future that will actually be the oversight and plan and roadmap for how all the people in these two communities may live together or not. So come with imagination. Please think outside the box. Think of the things that no one has thought of before, because certainly that's what I hope that we will see from you next week.
It never seems fair to follow Marianne because she always speaks with such eloquence and conviction, and is such a profound speaker, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share the podium with you this morning. I just want to take a second to ask you, are you excited? Are you excited? Maybe we need more coffee. I can tell you, I am so excited. It's not every day. In fact, Peter will probably have the chance to tell you how rare it is to have this kind of opportunity to come together to deliberate as a collective of residents in our area about the future of our area and our respective communities and what that might look like. You have no pressure, but you have an awesome responsibility. You are going to be sharing with each other over the course of the next many weeks the lived experience that you bring as residents of this region in each of these communities. And you're going to be reflecting on behalf of the many hundreds of thousands of people who share these communities, and the experience that they have, the services that they receive, the infrastructure that they rely on, and the quality of life that they enjoy in Greater Victoria, in Saanich and Victoria. And so I encourage you, like Marianne, to be imaginative, to bring curiosity. Please challenge assumptions, ensure that you're drilling in on issues that are going to help resolve some of the challenges we have either as separate communities or where those communities have an opportunity for shared service or perhaps common service. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the folks who've been involved in getting us just to this day. As Marianne pointed out, it was a referendum in 2014 and then another referendum in 2018, which really got this process underway. And here we are nearly 6 years since 2018, where voters told us to get on with the Citizens' Assembly. And today is the first day where that process begins. And it's thanks to Peter and his team, staff in both Saanich and Victoria, and the many residents and volunteers who've been involved in pushing this process forward and actually getting the doors open to get this process started. So let's just have a round of applause for everybody involved in doing that. I also want to acknowledge all of the folks who are sitting over by the big doors and windows who are joining us from all over the world to witness the beginning of this extraordinary process. Again, no pressure, but the eyes of the world are literally on you right now as you commence what is really a very extraordinary and profound undertaking on behalf of the residents in both Saanich and Victoria. And finally, I would just want to thank each of you for your commitment, both in terms of the sacrifice of your time away from your family and your life while you're in this process, and also because of your commitment to this community. The time that you put in here, the energy and effort that you put in really are demonstrative of your commitment to the well-being of everyone in this community. And we are so grateful that you've taken the time out of your busy lives to help guide the future of Saanich and Victoria. So please give yourselves a round of applause for taking that time. And finally, I just want to mention that the outcome of this process, of course, will be the product of your efforts, building consensus and coming up with recommendations that our respective councils will receive in the form of reports. And I just want to convey to you our commitment to respect those recommendations. That's something that we will be putting in front of the voters in whatever form that takes to ensure that your hard work ultimately results in a decision that will lead us forward. So the product of your effort really will steer the future of this community. So again, gratitude, appreciation, and wishing you all the very best in your deliberations over the course of the next few weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. So as you can see now, this is for real, right? Let me just tell you a little bit about what to expect today, right? I'm going to talk for a little bit of time about how we'll work together and rewind so that we all understand a little bit more about what Dean said when this process began in 14 and 18, that ballot initiative, our mandate that stems from it, and just extend a little bit about like how we find consensus. In what shape will this report take? What happens exactly after we deliver it? All of those very reasonable pieces of the puzzle. We'll have a chance to introduce ourselves to each other, of course. Then we have the first of 3 terrific presentations. And quite rightfully, we would want to begin this process by understanding and exploring an Indigenous perspective on the land, the water, and its governance. After lunch, we're going to be able to hear from John Lutz, a renowned local historian who's going to take us through the post-incorporation history of Victoria and Saanich, a history of municipal governance here. We're going to have a chance to get into an extended discussion amongst ourselves about the things we like about these communities. And then we're going to take it up another level of abstraction because, of course, this isn't the first time British Columbia have thought about whether they should tie the knot or not. And sometimes the province has simply said, thou shall. And other times communities have taken a look at it like we are today. So we're going to talk about the history of municipal amalgamation with a guy who has literally written the book on it, Bob Bish. Then we're going to talk about some of the values that we think should guide our outlook on what great municipal governance should look like. So the day's going to go very quickly. And I want to just say to you now, like, not too formal. If you feel like you need to like stand up, move around, don't wait for a break to get a cup of coffee. And washrooms are just down the corridor there. I want you to feel at home here and comfortable. There are a whole bunch of people whose job it is to keep you comfortable, right? And there's the core team, myself, Richard. I think everybody's had a chance to talk to Richard, maybe at the phone, or Chris Ellis back there, Kate McKnight over there. We are the kind of core assembly secretariat. We're part of an organization called MASS. We exist to bring together members of the public for conversations like these. We've been at it for a while. This is what we train for, right? So a morning like this is very exciting to us. We also are supported in this work by an oversight and an advisory committee. And these are the folks that are kind of keeping watch on the process. 2 sides to it, to make sure that what we're asking of you is reasonable. You've got enough time to work through these choices. Marja and Asasi at the back, we're very delighted to have her a member of our advisory team. She's a world-renowned expert in citizens' assemblies, and will be writing up a case study about this process. That's why we're asking you periodically to answer some questions from her so that she can document your experience. We're fortunate to have two professors, one emeritus, Warren Magnuson, one of Canada's leading academics on urban governance, and his colleague, Everett Lindquist. They make sure that you're getting the goods, right? Like when it comes to just the nuts and bolts of municipal administration and how you think about amalgamation, they are keeping watch and making sure we're hearing from the people and getting the ideas we might need. Paul Haynes, one important discussion in all of this is about emergency services. Well, he was the former chief of police next door in central Saanich, retired, but he's also able to help us think about the different perspectives and voices we'd want to consider. And very pleased to say that Ansley Tucker, the Dean of the Vancouver Anglican Diocese, is here. Ansley, another wonderful member of our Oversight Advisory Committee. And look, as you've seen in that package of material we sent to you, if you ever have some concern about the process that for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable expressing to me, or heaven forbid you express it to me and I don't hear you, you can reach out to a member of the Oversight and Advisory Committee. Maybe you want some more information about a topic and we haven't given you a satisfactory answer. Everett's your man. He'd be happy to talk to you. So they're there also helping to buttress this process. And our facilitation team, you're going to get to meet them as well. They're the folks who are just like going to keep close notes on what you say and make sure everyone has a chance to say it, right? And ensure that we've got some good documentation through this process. You're going to hear more later about the technical study team. When I said there were a lot of people here helping, I wasn't kidding. A big part of this project is the commissioning of an independent technical analysis of Victoria and Saanich. And they won a competitive tender. You're probably aware of this. This began as an accounting firm, MNP, right? They offer a range of professional services to the public sector. They have some of their analysts right now working with senior public servants in both municipalities to look at the finances, to look at the service levels, to look at they're going to tell us actually the next time we get together, all of the different components. They are arm's length preparing a technical report that is going to come to you midway through this process. Importantly, we get to meet with them the next time we're together, and you will get to say, yeah, but have you thought about, or I'd really like some information on, so you get to send them off and make sure they're bringing you the information that you want. We're impressed with their work so far, and I think they're going to provide a real boost to this process because it depends on good information, right? It depends on good information, so they're able to assemble that. Okay, our work and mandate. This is the stuff that as an assembly we're going to do. You may have found yourself over the last few weeks where you're like, hey, John, what are you doing this Saturday? Oh, I'm going to a citizens assembly. John, what's a citizens assembly? Well, it's a meeting, it's a committee, right? Okay, so the way that we think about a citizens assembly is this total mouthful, and I want to just unpack it. And we shouldn't get too carried away, right? Like, we're a group of randomly selected citizens, basically a committee that gets to take a close look at stuff. We call it long form because this is not like a Wednesday night at the community center for 45 minutes. You're putting in somewhere in the order of, 60, 80 hours into this process. And heaven knows how much time you're going to spend at home thinking about this and talking to others. So it's a big commitment, right? Deliberative process. What's that all about? That's talking. That's listening to each other. That's actually trying to do something that doesn't always happen in the provincial legislature, which is like trying to really understand each other's points of view and maybe try and find your way to common ground. That's what deliberative is about. Demographically representative. I'm going to say more about that in a moment, and we'll unpack how that brown envelope turned into this room. But it means that you've been selected 27 strong from Saanich. Who's from Saanich? Our population's a bit bigger than Victoria. Who's from Victoria? First of all, I'm so happy that I did that and it wasn't all Victoria over here and all Saanich here. So that's good. You're doing good. That's good, right? But we weren't just interested in which city or district you were from. There were other criteria. And this is intended to be like both communities in a room. And we didn't interview you, right? Right? We didn't ask you to answer a few skill testing questions or say, yeah, but are you really for this or against this or like what? Right? None of that happened. We just like hand in hat, pulled name, match criteria, and away you go. Study, right? We're all going to be learning a lot, not just from the technical folks at MMP. You're going to hear from probably more than 24 speakers over the course of our 8 sessions together, coming from a really wide array of perspectives in the community. If you have ideas about perspectives or even individuals that you think it'd be really good if we had a chance to hear from X, let us know, okay? And one or more consensus recommendations, okay? So ultimately, we have to come to ground on all of this. And, you know, the big question that everyone's asking is like, should it be 2 communities or 1 community, or should there be greater service integration, right? That's kind of the field of play in all of this. But you're not just going to say up, down, or somewhere in between. You're going to explain your thinking, and there are probably going to be a lot of recommendations that go with it. Here's the trick. We're not going to do what we see too often in politics, where 50% plus 1 carries the day. I think we've probably taken a shortcut in the way we govern ourselves as democracies that actually isn't helping ourselves as democracies. Because when we think we can call the vote, get 50 plus 1, what it means is that we can stop talking. And it means that we just get a little hardened to each other. And then we play those thin margins. We're going to try as an assembly to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We're going to keep talking until we're all kind of nodding. It doesn't mean that we're all going to get what we want, because we're all grown-ups. And part of being a grown-up is not getting everything you want, right? We all know that by now. So it's not that we expect to all be elated with the response. We all got to be able to live with it and get enough of what we want out of this process and the recommendation to feel good enough about it. And it sounds like I'm bringing the expectations way down, right? But that's kind of like, that's how life is, right? And that's what it means to agree with each other. So we all have to get a bit of this thing and feel pretty good about it. And that's gonna evolve. You know, 48 people, fair number, but these are 2 big communities. And we have to take this work seriously, but we can't take ourselves too seriously. You were randomly selected. You weren't elected. Selecteds, electeds, selecteds, elected, right? So we have to be really emphatic in how we work for community. And that's where I want you talking with community, you know, to your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues at work, and being like, I'm doing this thing, what do you think? Right? And like really listening to it. And I hope you'll find yourself at some point in this process saying things that you know are important to others, but that you yourself may not believe or agree with, right? You're going to see me as chair doing a lot of this. On the one hand, and on the other hand, and then on this foot, and we're going to try and like keep these perspectives in the air, right? And be as like even-handed or even-footed about the whole thing as we go along. I also want to say that you are part of a very special and unique tradition here in British Columbia. It's why there are all those people over there right now. Some of you may recall that 20 years ago, there was a kind of rip in the democratic continuum. And this province decided that the best way to think about changing the electoral system was to send out 10,000 letters and invite people to serve on what was the world's first modern citizens' assembly. How many people know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So this is the Morris Gwask Asia Pacific Hall in Vancouver. They didn't just build it for the Citizens Assembly, but it was a really nice space. And they sat there together for 11 months and ultimately made a recommendation that 58% of the public supported. This back in Gordon Campbell's time. And you'd say, well, why didn't we change the voting system then? It's because they set a supermajority of 60%. I'll leave it to you to decide whether it won or lost, but that's how the game was played. And here's the thing. Since that first assembly, it jumped the pond. Someone who came to talk about Ireland's voting system went back to Ireland and said, hey, we should do this here, to do some really tough stuff that Ireland was struggling with. Among the major issues, legalizing same-sex marriage. It was a citizens' assembly inspired by BC that led to that constitutional reform in Ireland. And over the last 20 years, Canadians, we don't know our own stories, right? There have been somewhere in the order of about 1,000 assemblies that trace their kind of lineage back to this place. And so these good people over here are running assemblies in, let's see it, United States, right? Denmark, yeah. We've got Belgium. There's a Hugh Pope. I'm probably right. I know. Germany, right? 160 folks have just been on Granville Island for the past 2 or 3 days at an annual conference talking about Citizens Assembly and this way of doing democracy. And I said, turns out we happen to be starting one. Would a few of you like to come over? So they're here just to see how we do it in BC. We've been doing it across Canada, though. There have been about 60 across Canada over the last 20 years. National ones on topics like pharmacare and mental health. And then BC ones. I Love GW, Granville Woodland in Vancouver, an official planning exercise. And then, of course, our friends next door up Island in Duncan, North Cowichan, that ran a process on municipal amalgamation that we'll talk more about in the future because, of course, it went to referendum, it didn't pass. So we'll talk more about that. This really got the license to operate from the community opinion question that was asked in 2018. Are you in favor of setting a citizens' assembly in motion? And about 3,500 more people said that was a good thing to do. So our legitimacy as an exercise flowing through the two councils comes from community, and that's why we have to work for them. We have this mandate given to us by a council, or committee rather, of the two councils, which thought through the structure, composition, terms of reference, and all the rest. You've seen this language before and all of the materials we've sent you. I will keep bringing us back to this because inevitably we will want to talk about all kinds of things, right? As any group of people would, that might not, strictly speaking, fall in our scope. And so we have to stick to the scope. And, you know, we are asked to think about our common aspirations for good local governance, but we have to think about it in terms of costs and benefits and disadvantages, either of the status quo or amalgamation or service integration. And here we are in this amazing college where they run programs that involve drilling and sheet metal work and really important trades that build our local economy. So we're going to roll with it, right? And if they're just like trimming the hedges, we're going to change that. I don't know. So as we're going to discover this afternoon with Bob Bish, the idea of amalgamation is actually like a varied thing. There are lots of different flavors to this, and that's why it deserves a long, rich discussion. We have to list a bunch of issues that we think have to be resolved, conditions, right, that would need to be thought through in order for amalgamation to merit consideration. Because it's one thing to say it's a good idea, how would you implement it? We got to get into those details a bit too. We got to weigh a bunch of evidence. That's what studying this thing is about. We have to think about the interests of both municipalities, and again, this consensus piece. You boil this all down, and what does it mean? Our tasks in this, to learn, to think about the needs and interests of others, to understand the implications, to weigh different options, and to recommend a course of action. A 5-point plan for our work. Does this make sense? Everybody's in the right room, right? Good. We can't have anyone just like sliding into the assembly. That'd be funny. So what happens? What happens if you say, yeah, I think actually you should amalgamate? As you just heard from Mayor Murdock, there is a commitment to carry this forward. Both councils would have to communicate to the province their intention to hold a referendum. And because of the way we do federalism in Canada, municipalities are children of the province. So the province has to say yes. It would be awkward if they said no, right? So we would assume, much like in Duncan, North Cowichan, that they would provide funds, and this would then proceed. And it's only through that referendum, should that referendum be successful, should you recommend amalgamation, that then there would be a transition period. And only at the time of a future election, of course, would those councils merge and a new corporation for the communities be established. We were also given 9 principles in our terms of reference from both councils. I think they make a lot of intuitive sense. We're to be transparent and open about our proceedings. It's for that reason that when someone's at the front, there's a little camera over there recording. When you're talking at your small tables, there are no cameras, there are no mics, okay? So don't worry about that. We take your confidentiality quite seriously. But the stuff up here, this is going to live on the web. The stuff that gets put on the screen, it's going to live on your website too. We're also going to have a couple of evening meetings online and in person with the community. We're going to have 2 open house days. So if you want your friends and family to come check it out, November the 2nd will be the first time for that. Effective representation is what we did with the civic lottery. Accessibility, our job is just to remove whatever barriers stand in your way of doing good work. We're independent, so while it's great the mayors are here to send us off, shortly thereafter they will disappear, and we are in our own sort of protected political space. You're not going to hear them commenting in the media about this being a good idea about it. Right? Well-informed, 20-some speakers, blah, blah, blah. Balanced, even-footed, even-handed, collaborative, the consensus piece. But fundamentally what we have to do, and I ask you to bring this always to our discussions, is respect for each other. Because we are going to disagree. You're going to get tired of listening to me. You may get tired of listening to one or more people at your table, right? That's human. We will be human in this experience, but we will also be kind, right? We'll respect each other. And when you feel like, okay, I just need to step out, we'll step out. And then we'll find the energy and keep going.
Question?
Yes,
A question about the previous slide, what happens if we recommend amalgamation?
yes.
It says that both municipalities have committed to deliberating on this outcome if we recommend amalgamation. What are the chances that either of the municipalities shoots us down?
I can't say categorically. I would say that those chances are very low. They're very low because it would be, again, awkward if you guys did a really good job and then this money had been spent, this time had been spent, this work could be done, you have a very thoughtful report, and then by a vote of like 1, the council is like, yeah, we're not accepting this report. You would be upset. Other people would be upset. That would create pain, right? Political concept here, right? Political science. Pain would be imposed. So I don't think that's likely. Weird things happen, but I don't think it's likely. Any other quick questions? Yes.
If the next step, after we put our recommendations together, and we choose to amalgamate, or choose to be in favor of amalgamation, is to put it to a vote, then why do we have this process in the first place? Why can't we just skip right to the vote if that's the consent back?
Well, so I guess the question is, why not just have a referendum tomorrow about it? Yeah. Well, I think not unreasonably. You're about to discover how complicated the question is and that there's a lot to understand. And look, if it was going to be a direct referendum, I guarantee you that the councils would have set up their own committee of elected politicians to do something similar. But they thought they're a little, I hope they won't mind me saying this, but self-interested, right? They got elected to be a councillor for X or Y. So they're like, let's punt this, in the respectful way, punt, to another group of community representatives whose political fortunes are not connected to this discussion, and let them do the committee work to bring to the community a thoughtful recommendation. And I would hope that other members of the community would look to your report and say, well, you know, I haven't had a chance to think about this all this long, but they did. Maybe we should follow their lead, right? So certainly it's possible, it's viable, but the will of both council and the community was that a group of residents should study this issue first. Please.
You said that the presentation and the items on the screen will be available on the web. I'm just curious, would that be on an ongoing basis or at the end of everything?
No, ongoing basis, so.
We can represent ourselves if we want.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all this stuff, every day, what I'm saying here is in your binders, and you can, the idea is like scribble all over those binders, make notes to yourselves. By the spring, those binders are going to be heavy and thick. I hope you don't have to carry 2 binders, but I can't make any promises just yet. It's going to be a lot of information, but it will all live online. So let me just say a little bit about, yeah, please. They absolutely know this is happening. Absolutely. In fact, they're contributing to the financing of this. So are they being briefed? No, there is intended to be a little bit of a respectful distance, you know, while we're doing this work. So we will keep them apprised if there is a new government. I'm sure someone from the 2 communities will brief senior members of the municipal affairs team, but no one is doing a blow-by-blow, as in, I'm never going to be speaking to the clerks. It's actually the clerks of both councils that are my liaison. I'm never going to be saying, Kurt, I think we're going this way, right? So that's not happening. This is our space. And you're not ever going to hear me or any of our colleagues, and I hope this would extend to you, offering a running commentary in the media or social media about this, right? We need room and space, and notwithstanding openness and transparency, but a degree of privacy to have this conversation. Is that good? Yes.
Just at the end of this process, there will be a referendum, and we hope, and there will be a question. The previous Citizens Assembly on proportional representation resulted in a very murky question. And a lot of people didn't understand it became political. Will this group be responsible for crafting that question, or is that going to be up to the council?
Excellent point. Because I said, there are going to be a lot of recommendations. That would be among them. As would potentially your advice on maybe what you think residents ought to know about this issue and how they would come to know it during the course of a referendum campaign. So your thoughts on that would be important. But thinking too far ahead at this stage is premature because it's an open question for us. I want to be really, really clear from the outset that a recommendation to preserve the integrity of both municipalities is a successful result for this assembly. A recommendation to amalgamate both municipalities is a successful result for the assembly. A set of recommendations about different ways of integrating services at a regional level is a successful result for the assembly. The only way we fail is if we fail to reach agreement on any of those three outcomes.
Obviously, if we were to recommend amalgamation or partial amalgamation, integration, whatever, there would be a referendum in order to make any change. If the group decided, yeah, no, let's just leave it the way it is, would that go to a referendum, stay the same? Or because there's no change?
My understanding is that there would be no referendum should you endorse the status quo. Status quo always sounds pejorative, so that's why you hear me catch myself when I say it. I try and be mindful of language. Let's just say status quo is not a bad term right now. It's just like the way things are now. If you say the way things are, the way they should be, I don't believe there would be a referendum. Council would vote to accept the report. Now, they are political animals. Who knows what they might choose to do on their own accord, but you guys are settling this question, I would expect, for a good while. Yes, please.
Not that it's very likely, but is it also possible that should this group be in favor of amalgamation, political winds would decide the referendum is actually not necessary in force? Is that ever happened or whatever?
Sorry, if you endorse amalgamation, do you say?
You seem to be playing this as the two options.
Yeah.
You know, sort of the biggest change would be to push for a referendum because people point out you guys voted to vote anyway. So, but is it possible that actually the province would step in and say, this is great, no referendum, do it?
I think, see comments read political pain. Commitments have been made. They're documented. There have been votes about this. Provinces have been known to override municipalities on all kinds of things, but I'm not sure it would be in anyone's political interest to do so, given the commitments that have been made. Okay. A few more things. I want to get everyone up to introduce yourselves. The lottery, right? So we sent out this thing, 10,000. We had 580 people respond. There were 207 people who wanted to be sitting in your chair this morning. Right? People, right? That's it. Like you took their seat. Yeah, right? Who are you, right? You took their seat. They were prepared to put their lives on hold as well. They wanted every bit as much to be here. And you got lucky, right? You got lucky. We have to recall that, because I think it actually brings a little bit of humility to the proceedings. That's a tough thing about trying to step into other people's shoes. But you need to be mindful. You need to think that as I'm in this chair, there were another 5 or 6 people who wanted to be in my chair. And they could have come from a very different background, very different political perspective, very different way of seeing the world. But I'm here. And I'm here for them, too. And I'm here for everybody who didn't get a brown envelope, but might have wished they had. And I am here for those people who got the letter, wanted to volunteer, but their daughter was getting married on one of the Saturdays, and so they couldn't commit to all of them. Or they just started a new job and knew they'd be tired and didn't feel they could reasonably commit to it. There are thousands of people I would propose to you who want to be in your chair. And they'll still want to be in your chair when you get tired on the 5th day. And they'll still want to be your chair when you're frustrated on the 6th. And we have to work for them. That's what it means to think for the community. We pulled names. There's a computer involved. There's an algorithm. But for our purposes, we pulled names out of hats, okay? Without reading your name. We were blind to this process, but it was done in a way that gives us the 2 communities in a room. In terms of demographics, housing, age, you're going to get to know each other better, and I think you will see this. And of course, all of us are not just our embodied identity. We have relationships, we have family, we have friends, right? So these are demographic attributes, but you also carry community attributes. You have to bring the richness of that. We were careful to make sure there are people coming from different neighborhoods, right, as well. Creates this mosaic, wonderful Canadian word, right? A mosaic of the 2 communities. Last few things I'm going to say. 8 Saturdays. Okay, so that's what you've got when you are looking at these bars. These big fat bars are Saturdays, and we're going to spend a lot of time early on absorbing information, learning. It won't be boring, but we're going to hear from those 20-some speakers, right? And just like now, you're going to ask really good questions, and that's awesome, right? I wanted to point out, too, November the 2nd, friends and family do come along. And that should say February the 8th, not November the 8th, February the 8th. That's the second occasion when friends and family can come along. The little blue dots at the bottom. The first meeting will be in the evening. That's the virtual session. And then we've got an evening in-person session. And that's when we invite in the whole community to come and talk with you about our work. The other half, though, of this process is all of that talk. All that talk. So if you get through today and be like, but we only had like 90 minutes or so to talk in small groups, we did a lot of listening. Yes, but that ratio is going to shift day by day by day as we go along. This is actually what the program looks like. We will share all of this and do a more detailed briefing about who you're hearing from next time. But the green are presentations, the blue is discussion. And so you see that kind of diagonal line going on. Pink is a tour, so we are going to rent a bus at some point and go. I know, cool, right? Field trip. So we're going to have a chance to see the community that you know so well. How do we ever get to consensus? How many people have ever done brainstorming? All right, we're not brainstorming. This is not going to be like, every idea is a good idea, let's stick it to the wall, and then let's like muscle up and defend our views. No. We are going to work by talking about values, what we can all agree on, and then we're going to get increasingly specific. What are the issues that are pertinent? Amongst those issues, which ones do we care most about? How would they be impacted by this decision? And all of that, through all the conversation, that's how we're going to move. Not from like starting today, who wants amalgamation? Who wants integration? No, we're just going to work our way. We're going to step our way towards kind of working consensus, and it'll get very nuanced. Last shape. Because while we're going this way, you're smiling, you know what this is, right? This is the bit that each of you is going to feel at a different point. It might be at the end of today. You might be, whoa, what did I get myself in for? It might be towards the end where he's like, I can't reconcile these two perspectives. It's that, we call it the diamond of despair, right? Groan zone, right? Fed up with this. We're here to keep the energy up. We're here to listen. But we don't have facilitator tricks. We don't do that, right? I don't even know what that would be. Probably really lame. When you feel this, talk to us about it. Say I'm feeling frustrated or I don't like it or whatever. That's okay, express that. But then it's up to you. Then it's up to you to decide, like, is this going to be an inflection point or is this going to be where we fall off the cliff? And I would just ask that when you find that moment, you're honest with yourself about it, with us about it, but that you also remember those 5 other people wanted to be in your chair, right? And maybe for that next 30 minutes, try and speak for them and see how it goes, right? But we will get through it. We'll get through it. You're going to produce some paper in all of this. You're going to be doing the writing. We will do the kind of boilerplate. This is the process. This is what we learned. But we're going to issue an interim report to the community that's about values and issues. So folks know what we're talking about in December. Technical report comes to you in January, goes to the public in February. And then you'll be writing your final report. And I assure you, because everyone's like group writing, that is a special kind of, it's going to be fine. You're going to write a beautiful report. And it's going to be in your words, which is what will have the greatest credibility, right? But I also want you to know that if you get through this and you're like, no, we overlooked something, or there's something off about the process, or like the community needs to know this little bit, or I really like this piece and I want to emphasize it. All of you, just as a function of being a member of the Citizens Assembly, is entitled to write a minority report. It's not going to be pages and pages, it'll be like a paragraph or 2. Nobody's going to edit it, and it will go into the appendix of the final document. And that is an important safety valve on all of this, so that you are scrutinizing what's going on. You are critically engaged with the recommendation. And so you, in that instance, can speak as one voice as yourself, whereas the rest of the report is speaking as a whole. Does that make sense? Okay. Last thing. So this is kind of like in recent history, we all walk around with these voice recorders and video cameras, totally connected to every other human on the planet. And I can't enforce anything, right? I'm not a cop about this stuff. I would just say to you that while it's fine to say to friends and neighbors and put on Facebook that, hey, I'm a member of the Citizens Assembly, that's cool. I think out of respect to the other people who volunteered, that we're not going to editorialize. We're not going to provide a running commentary. After this process is done, you can write and say whatever you like to however many people you please. But while we're doing this, I think it'd be very awkward if somebody was to post something one day, we come back together on Saturday the next, you're like, why'd you post that? That's not what I said, right? It's just, again, awkward. Same thing, you may get contacted by the media. You're gonna hear Richard on the island on Monday, because and I'll be speaking to them as well. And we're gonna say, we did this. We're not gonna say we said that. It's gonna be very matter of fact, because we wanna keep the community informed about it, but we're not editorializing. You may be contacted by the media, and I'd ask you to observe that same thing. Yeah, doing this. Or just let us know that the media's contacted you. and we're happy to speak for them. That's part of our job, to do the kind of comms around this. Can I ask that of you? Is that fair? We'll just keep it holstered until the end. No keyboard warriors, right? Okay, cool. I think that's it. I'd like us to introduce ourselves in a moment, but Sandra, you've got a question?
I do. I have a question. When you first began